Good evening. I wanted to start this evening by acknowledging what happened today at London Bridge, in the centre of the UK capital, of course. We could host an entire show about terrorism and violence, and of course many hours have been spent on this already. But the aim of these sorts of attacks is to make us nervous, and it's for this reason that we're going to continue with our show tonight exactly as originally planned. But of course tonight our thoughts are of course with those who've been injured, those who've lost their lives, and of course, once again, our thanks to the amazing people that stepped in to protect us all today. So let's move back to that election debate we've just watched. And what did you think about it? Tonight, we're not going to plant any trees. We're not going to sell anything to America. Instead, we're going to look at the party election debate, which just took place over the last hour on the BBC, and ask you what you made of it. If you've been screaming wildly at your TV or device or tweeting wildly your thoughts, then now is the time to join in this roundtable discussion where you have a seat at the table too this time. You can comment in the chat box directly and we'll be asking you to vote on some of the issues we've all just been watching from the party's representatives as well. I've certainly got some concerns. Don't know about you. I'm sure you have got some questions. This is the Midson Project you're watching. I'm Richard Midson, former news editor, journalist and political comms pro, and I set up this project to try to help start repairing the awful state that democracy seems to have got itself into. Don't forget, this is a partisan politics-free zone. It's more like a collection of quick explanation videos on the issues in the news to help you understand what the heck is going on. So we're also going to be finishing off our masterclass section as well a little bit later on. That's something that you really want to be watching if you're passionate about a particular issue and you'd like to get that point across to the public as well. As usual, I've tried to invite people from across the political spectrum. So if you think a point of view is missing, it's because no one said they would appear. So please take up their case and add the arguments that they should have been putting forward in the chat box for them. And let's hear all sides. Just one word of caution, as I say, back up your points. Don't just say X is bad, because that doesn't help anyone. We want to know why they're bad. So let's move on to issue one today. Is the NHS going to be sold to America? Joining me tonight to discuss this issue and all the other issues are two political operatives who should be able to bring some expertise to help us understand the issues this evening. We've got Calvin Robinson, who is a former Brexit Party candidate. Just tell us very briefly your background, very quickly, Calvin.
I'm a secondary school teacher. I teach computer science. As you mentioned, I was a Brexit Party candidate for Broxtowe, standing against Anna Soubry. And before that, I was a lifelong Conservative.
Superb. And also we have got Alan O'Kelly. Apologies about the captions on the screen if you're watching this tonight. Alan, just introduce yourself as well. You're from Conservative Progress too.
Yeah, I'm Alan O'Kelly. I'm from the Director of Operations for Conservative Progress. We're a small but growing grassroots conservative organisation. And in my day-to-day job, I'm in public affairs.
Superb. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us tonight. So let's talk about this issue then. So Jeremy Corbyn said you vote for the Conservatives, you get Johnson-Trump government. Both Nicola Sturgeon and Caroline Lucas from the Greens also brought up Trump tonight on that debate. Labour accusing the Conservatives of basically making a bunch of lies. The Conservatives said it would never happen and it's going to remain free. The NHS will remain free at the point of delivery. But what actually is going to be the situation there? I mean, is the NHS going to be sold to America? Let's start with you, Calvin. Is it going to be sold?
Of course it's not, Richard. What is this nonsense, honestly?
But this is the case they keep putting, though, isn't it? This is a case Labour have been putting over and over again.
But the fact that we're talking about it right now means that it's working. What they want is for us to be talking about the NHS being sold. It's not on the table. Trump said it's not on the table. Boris said it's not on the table. Liz Truss said it's not on the table. And the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said it's not on the table. So where is this coming from? And I think we have to look at the timing as well, Richard. If you look at what happened this week, the day after Corbyn got annihilated on Andrew Neil's interview, they have a special press release to announce documents that are what, 4 weeks old? They were leaked.
Sure, but I mean, what I'm going to try and do here is put maybe some of the perspective from the other side. And I guess what they're saying here is that, look, if you're coming out of the EU, you're under pressure to do a trade deal. Yeah. The people with the power in this relationship in a US-UK trade deal are the US. So we're going to be under pressure. I'm just trying to put across their point of view here. So please come in a moment. they're saying that in which case the US are going to have the control here. They're going to be able to say, we want access to that if you want a trade deal. Is that not the case? Alan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think people misunderstand some of this. I mean, I think firstly, there's been lots of trade deals already done, and while this document that was put out is, at best not even a statement of intent at this stage of what different parties would like to see in terms of a trade deal. But if you look at some of the trade deals that have already been done between, like, say, the US and New Zealand, health purchasing hasn't been part of it. It hasn't been part of deals with Australia, and it generally actually doesn't form parts of any trade deals. I think this other idea that the US is going to be all powerful and that they're going to hold all the cards in a US-UK trade arrangement is just not true. I mean, look at the US deal with in NAFTA between Canada and Mexico. Mexico seems to be able to argue their case quite strongly, and there's always trade-offs. But I think the government has been really clear. The Conservative Party's been really clear. I think both the Prime Minister and today Rishi was very, very clear on that debate. It's not for sale, and I think Calvin's absolutely right. The timing of this so-called that took place the day after Andrew Neil.
Sure, I get the politics side of it, but in terms of the actual the trading reality of having a negotiation, let's say then, is there a possibility that this could be almost done through the back door instead of just waiting for the election to get over and then just sort of selling off contracts on smaller things and gradually increase it in the background? I mean, would that actually be a problem?
To add some balance, I think
Please.
What we have seen from this is that we do know now what the US would want from a trade deal in regards to the NHS, and that is they want extended patents, which is not necessarily in our interest. And I know you said there's a power imbalance there, but I don't think there is. I think Alan's right in that it's a negotiation. There'll be give and take on both sides. But it's clear that the NHS isn't for sale. That's not what they're looking at. But what they're looking at is how can they make more money from the NHS, which is a reasonable stance for someone to be looking at when they want to make a trade deal with us. And we don't want to be extending patents. And now that we know that that's what the US are looking for, we know what to be bargaining against.
So, from your perspective, both of you, is the NHS going to be sold to America? No, absolutely not then, is it? No. Well, what do you think about this? Do let us know. We have had this poll up for a little while now on the website, and as you can see already, is the NHS going to be sold to America? We've got 60% of you saying no and 40% of you saying yes. So still quite a lot of people convinced by that argument, but what do you think by that? You can go to the website right now and you can vote by going to themidsumproject.com/episode 4. Let's move on to our next topic tonight. Now, should this election just be treated as a rerun of the referendum? That's the question. Certainly when we watched the debate tonight, there was a lot of time spent on Brexit, wasn't there? But there's also issues like climate change, about poverty, all those aspects. What about the debt as well, and funding healthcare, all these different issues as well. But the Liberal Democrats made it very, very clear that their big campaign for this is we're going to stay in. The Conservatives have said we're going to get Brexit done. Labour have said something sort of in between. So is this just a rerun of the referendum? Calvin, over to you.
I think it is, mate, and I think that's a massive shame. Like you said, there are so many important issues that we need to discuss, we need to get to, and they're being neglected, and that is because everything is about Brexit right now, which is why, without wanting to sound too much like a Tory, we do need to get Brexit done. We need to get it out of the way so that we can focus on the trade deals and focus on the NHS and the schools and the policing. From the Liberal Democrat side of things that you mentioned, that's also a big shame. I think the Liberal Democrats have been a party that have been around a long time, very well respected for being liberal and for being democratic. And I don't think they're either in this election.
But I think, when we were watching that debate there, we heard their argument, and their line is that people didn't know what they were voting for. And now that the attention, well, this is their case, isn't it? This is what they're saying, is that now the attention has been put onto this issue and people took it seriously because there was a Brexit vote. People have now looked at it and they've realised that actually it's bad news and therefore people need to have another vote. Is that not a fair argument?
That's not their stance. The Labour Party is saying they want a second referendum, which is what the Lib Dems should have been.
Oh, sorry, yeah, the Lib Dems just want to leave, yeah.
They want to revoke, which is undemocratic based on the referendum result that we had. It's bonkers. I can't get my head around that.
Alan?
Yeah, I think I think the position has been ridiculous. I don't think they've managed to convince anyone that that's actually to their side. I think they took a very an interesting strategic decision early on to be, outrightly revoke, and it doesn't look like that's paying off. It looks like that the public, does respect the referendum. I think the other point as well. I mean, not to rerun this debate, but like this argument that people didn't know what they were voting for, but now now they do, is just it's childish, and it's been played out for the last 3 years. I think the public.
But don't you think though that attention has? I mean, I was working in European politics when this happened, and I was working as a journalist before that, and we just didn't cover European issues because no one cared. And all of a sudden, when the referendum happened and we got the result we did, suddenly the media discovered where Brussels was and people started finding out where it was. And then attention went on it. So to kind of play devil's advocate here from the Lib Dem side is suddenly people did actually pay attention. Did they really know before?
I think you're being a bit too political minded there, because if you take into consideration this is one of the biggest vote shares that we've ever seen in any election, referendum or anything in this country, people came out for this. So they really did care, and they did know what they were voting for at the time.
Excellent point.
I think it's important to say they didn't.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, actually. I think that's absolutely right. And I'd also add to that. I mean, it's not like the referendum campaign was fought in a vacuum, that, and people didn't engage with it. There was dozens and dozens of debates. It was on every newsstand. It was on every television show. It was very, very well litigated. There was a minor, as I recall, there was a minor flurry of scandal from both sides about the government spending money to send leaflets to every household in the country.
Yeah.
This idea that people weren't fully engaged, and as Kevin's rightly said, it's one of the biggest vote shares in history. People were more than
so let me disagree with that. I found something I can disagree with Alan on here.
Yeah.
Because yes, the electorate were very well educated, because the government wasted £9 million of our taxpayers' money, which they should never have done, on one side of the debate. So they sent out those Remain leaflets. So everyone knew.
So in fact, there's almost a debate in itself about, well, how much money should be allowed to be spent on information and when it is so political. Got a comment actually from Andrew saying that agrees the Lib Dems are being foolish. Okay, that's a political point there. Labour, whilst it would delay the issue, would perhaps give an opportunity for the proper facts to be presented. Okay, so he's concerned about whether really people did fully understand what was going on. One of the things that I found working in European politics as well is, even working in it, is that it was really hard to understand what the issues are, because it's so complex. And when you try and condense it down into something as simple as should we leave or stay, it's actually, it really is about a question of balance. And I think a lot of people did vote emotionally and not necessarily understood all the ins and outs of it, because sure as hell I didn't. It's just so complex.
But is that true? That's true of a lot of things. So I don't think and that seems to imply that one person's reason for voting is better than another person's reason for voting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're 3 years on, and we should be refighting the debate.
Yeah. And I think it's fine for it to have been emotive, because this isn't an economic argument or purely economic argument. This is about how we see ourselves as our place in the world. It's much bigger than just policies.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point, isn't it? Because one of the standard arguments is, look, this is going to damage business, this is going to damage our economy, but it's also, if you didn't want to have a democracy, you would have a pure bureaucracy. And you'd have economists running your country. You wouldn't have elections. So democracy is about the way you feel. There's one scenario I'd like to put to you both, though. Let's say you've got a Labour voter who is passionate about Labour policies, who thinks Jeremy Corbyn is the best thing since sliced bread, but they want Brexit. What should they do? Calvin.
Does that person exist?
Well, fair point.
I've been out in Newcastle, I've been out in Nottingham, I've been all around the country campaigning in this election. And what I've seen is a lot of Labour voters, or former Labour voters, that also voted Leave, and they want to leave the European Union. And what they're struggling with at the moment is who to vote for. Because they can't bring themselves to vote Conservative. It's tribal, it's historic, it's ingrained in them from their parents and their parents' parents. So they're struggling with that. I don't think they're too tied down to Corbyn. I don't think he's anyone's favourite at the moment.
Wow.
But what I would say to them is just hold your nose, vote Tory. We need Boris Johnson. We need him to have a strong majority to get Brexit done. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and what if they then go, well, yes, we got Brexit done, but I don't agree with anything else? That's the problem, isn't it? That's the quandary.
Well, let's have another election after that then.
Not another one. Oh, God.
We have one every year now, don't we? Come on.
It'll soon be law, won't it? Alan, what would be your advice to that Labour supporter?
I think it's the same as Calvin. I think if you're the thing that motivates you is Brexit. If seeing through the results of the referendum is what you think is the most important thing, then voting Conservative is the only way to see that through. I think Calvin's analysis is absolutely on the money. There's a lot of people in that situation who, for deep reasons may not want to, but if Brexit's what's driving you, then there's really only one choice at this point.
I wish we had some other sort of sides of the perspectives on this one. As I said before, if you know someone in the other parties, or if you'd like to put a point of view, please do, because we would really like to get a full balance on all the issues that we discuss in future shows as well. Let's have a look at that polling again, just to see what we got from earlier today. We asked the question, should you vote in the 2019 election as if it's a Brexit referendum rerun? In fact, it's literally 50-50 at the moment. So 50% of you saying yes, 50% of you saying no. Let's move on to the third issue. And this came up in the debate tonight, a question of trust. Caroline Lucas was saying that all these issues are being used as a political football. Will you deliver on this? Will you not deliver on that? Is the economy stronger or worse? The Tories saying married families will pay more. The Labour Party is saying that we can afford to spend all this money. But what's actually the truth? It gets very confusing and very hard to find out whether things are right, and then can we therefore trust what the politicians are saying? Is there perhaps an argument that we should be having a series of planned debates set up perhaps by the Electoral Commission, which all the leaders have to go along and attend as well? Because at the moment we seem to have a series of broadcasters all trying to outdo each other with the best debate. So it's a big issue. So let's see if we can actually home it down onto just one particular point here. And that is, should the leaders be required to attend a series of set debates? What do you think about this? Let's start with you, Alan, this time.
No, actually, I think. Well, so I don't think there's a need for a kind of electorally mandated rules on this. I think what we've seen. I don't think this election is suffering from a lack of debates. There's already been one debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. There's going to be another one next week. We've had a number of debates at different levels around the at different levels of the party. We had one just a few moments ago, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I think there's plenty of opportunity for people to hear from leaders. I mean. Common things we've got to remember is debates are relatively new phenomenon in British politics. Since 2010 was when the first types of debates took place. You go back to 2017, there, as I recall, I might be forgetting one, but I don't recall a head-to-head debate directly between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. And then all of a sudden, this seems to be back on the table of the public is somehow being ill-served unless there's endless debates between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson. I don't think the public are suffering from a lack of.
Do you think it would help though? I mean, well, one of my frustrations with the debate tonight, and frankly of watching all the debates, is that there's just so much waffle, and I'm not hearing any factual answers. So the question like, well, what will we do about climate change? And people just go, well, it's a priority. It's really important. It's like, yeah, okay, great. So what are you going to do? I mean, in fairness to Plaid Cymru, I think he was the only person that actually said, well, we could do this and we could do this and we could do this. And I spent an hour and a half listening to that debate, and I think that was about the only time we ever actually had some sort of practical steps that we can take next. I realise why politicians don't do it, because it's easier to attack you there than to just have big sweeping statements. But is there perhaps a need then to have a formal debate with clear set questions which they kind of have to answer? Or is it even possible, actually? Calvin?
I think you're right on some points there. I think tonight's debate was very gimmicky. There was a lot of screeching, a lot of squabbling over each other. It was hard to hear anyone. And the Plaid Cymru guy actually was the most presentable when he got a chance to speak. I think debates are tricky. I don't think we should regulate it because we don't have a presidential system. We don't necessarily need for the leader of the party to speak. For example, the Channel 4 debates the other evening, it would have been fine for Michael Gove to get up there and talk about the environment. He knows the brief very well. It would have been very good for the electorate to hear what Michael Gove had to say. But regarding trust and what the Greens and also the Brexit Party, Richard Tice mentioned trust, in that I do think we are losing trust in our politicians. I don't think they've stuck to their manifestos over the last few election cycles. I do think it's quite it's too easy for them to spin not necessarily lies, but mistruths, like this NHS situation. So something does need to be done about it, but I'm not sure leadership debates are the way forward.
For me personally, I would quite like to see a proper interrogation, and I'm sure you both watched Andrew Neil as well with Jeremy Corbyn, and that was really quite an aggressive one. I felt a little bit that it got too aggressive. It didn't give Jeremy Corbyn a chance to answer, but I do like the way that Andrew Neil was asking very specific questions and asking for detailed answers. You can imagine him hosting that debate just then. You imagine how different that would have been.
But one point I'd make on that is, I mean, is if you want, there are two different things you're looking for here. If you're looking for an in-depth policy discussion on exactly what a party is going to do on climate change, maybe, or on something even more specific, then you probably need the party spokesman on that particular topic, the supposed expert on it. I think leaders are about, leadership interrogations are meant to be a bigger picture stuff, and it does get too easy to turn into a trying to catch someone out. And I Jeremy Corbyn was a classic example of that during the week. There were, in fairness to him, some areas where probably might have been unreasonable to expect him to know all the detail of every particular topic. So I think whether you want kind of forensic, if you want forensic insight, I think you need to kind of bring out people who are not necessarily in the frontier of politics and really drill down. But I think it takes a lot longer than the 5 or 6 minutes or 10 minutes that are given in the middle of these debates. I think it is something deeper.
Well, that was one of the things you could tell with Andrew Neil. He was really trying to move it on, wasn't he, the whole time as well? Right. So let's have a look at what did you say in the polling on this one. Should the leaders be forced to appear for a set of TV grillings? Well, it actually had 83% on this saying yes and 17% saying no on that one. So clearly a popular view on that one. Right, we're going to move on in a moment to the masterclass. We're going to get some tips on how you could campaign about an issue that you're concerned about in a moment. But first, let's have a quick look back at some of the issues from last week. One of the questions was this one that we've actually just repeated tonight as well. We asked you, should your 2019 vote be entirely based on Brexit? And at the time, 76% of you said no, 14% of you said yes. Should the NHS be a topic for the election? Remember, we were talking about this where doctors said that the NHS was being weaponised and so it shouldn't be included in election debates. Well, 100% of you said it should be included. And should you tax the rich more or less? 52% of you saying more, 23% of you saying less, and 25% of you, yeah, that does work out about the same. Thank you very much for your thoughts. So let's move on to the masterclass now, and one of the ideas of this show as well is to try and share some ideas about how you can campaign and get your ideas across about the issues that you're concerned about. And having a couple of guests on who have been involved in campaigning is obviously a great opportunity to try and share some of these ideas with you. So Alan, can I come across to you first? So someone's sitting at home watching this and they're going, I'm really bugged about this particular issue. What sort of advice could you give them about how to get their message out there? What would be your main tip today?
Well, I think if you really care about something and you want to kind of affect change, then you have to get involved in the political process, and you have to find a party or get involved in an organization that kind of that supports the issues you care about. My big advice would be, firstly, don't start with social media. If you want, there's plenty of people you'll find on social media. You can spend your days debating it back and forth, but I've yet to find someone who changed their mind as a result of a debate on Twitter. I'm sure they're out there. So I would strongly say, find an opportunity locally, or find an opportunity with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a political party, but it can be a party, a charity, a campaign group, an NGO group. There are plenty of them out there, and just get involved. And you don't have to. My big advice to people is, you don't have to worry about having a full plan about how you're going to tackle it, or how you go about that. It can be simply just start at the bottom, hand out leaflets, start talking to people, get your ideas out there, and be willing to learn. And that's the big message I'd give to people, is get out there and be willing to learn about how campaigns work, because all of us start at the same position. We start at the bottom, we all figure it out as we go.
Yeah, so it's a good place to learn as well. So even if you're not particularly concerned about getting involved in politics directly or going to Westminster, it's a good place to actually learn the ropes and how to do it, isn't it? Yeah. Calvin, can we come across to you for your tip?
Yeah, I'm going to contradict Alan a little bit here, because I'm going to say avoid party politics if you really want to make a difference, especially in a local area. I would say the lower down the rung you are on the ladder in party politics, the more partisan you have to be, the more you have to stick to the party line, and the less you can actually be free and say what you actually think. What you want to do if you want to make a difference locally is join a residents' association. Then you can lobby the Conservatives, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, whoever's in power in your area. You can actually make a difference for the people where you live, if that's what's of interest to you. That's how I started out on a clean air project in the area that I lived, and we made a difference there to people's lives that actually live in our community. I think that's a good way to get involved. If you want to go into a party after that, sure, but try it out for your local area first.
Yeah, there's a comment I'm seeing there saying, yes, put your phones and social media down and actually talk to people. Novel, old-fashioned even. There's a comment being made there. And if people want, people have heard about the big major parties, but if people want to get involved in the Residents Association, how do they find out about those? How did you find out about it?
I checked on Twitter to find the nearest one, but there's usually a website, or you usually get a leaflet through your door, or look on the local. There's still those little notice boards around towns, and just look out for them because they're always there.
Superb. Thank you very much for both of you for joining us tonight. It's a rapid debate on a couple of different issues, and thanks very much for watching the BBC debate as well. Thank you to you as well for joining us this evening. I hope you found that a little bit enlightening on some of the issues that were discussed a little bit earlier. We will have another show coming up soon. If, as I say, you've got people that you know, or if you're a member of another political party or different side of the political spectrum and you would like to get involved so that we can get a whole broad church of different ideas on this programme as we develop it and try and refine it as well, please do let me know. Get in contact with me at themidsonproject.com because we would love to have as many different views as we can on. But for now, have a wonderful evening. We'll speak to you soon.